The important thing about restorative justice in education is that it impacts every aspect of education, including the institution.
When we look at restorative justice through relationships first, we have to remember that the first relationship we need to look at is our relationship with ourselves. In order to move forward with other relationships, we need to first closely examine and look inward and see what we value and believe in.
The important thing about restorative justice in education is building, sustaining, and repairing relationships in the context of a school environment.
The important thing about restorative justice through relationships first is that it really is a different way of doing education and of being involved in education with others.
The important thing about restorative justice through relationships first is teaching students how to respond in a positive way to everyday challenges at school.
The important thing about restorative justice is relationships and understanding relationships with other people and yourself.
Restorative justice in education is a concept that is both simple and complex. Simple in that it comes out of the core belief that all people are worthy and interconnected, and complex in that this is woven into all aspects of education. Often, restorative justice is understood primarily as a means for addressing conflict and harm so that safety in schools can be assured. Though this is part of it, on its own, this perspective can result in a focus on the behavior and needs of individuals disconnected from their context. When this occurs, restorative justice is only a tool or strategy. The purpose of this video is to illustrate how restorative justice in education is much more than this, as it shifts our energies from controlling behavior to engaging relationally. At its heart, restorative justice is a way of being and living that grows out of the belief that people are interconnected and all have worth and dignity simply because they are human. In other words, restorative justice in education comes through putting relationships first. Making this shift to prioritizing relationships over behavior is difficult. Reflecting on 3 key questions when interacting with others can help me identify my motives. Am I honoring? Am I measuring? What message am I sending? In other words, when I am with people, do I judge and measure them for what they say, look like, or do? Or do I honor them, knowing that anyone I am with is as important and valuable as the next? Do people get the message that I value them for who they are, not for who I want them to be? Implementing restorative justice in the school context using the idea of relationships first is like tossing a pebble into the water. The pebble is the foundational understanding that all are worthy and interconnected that makes contact with the whole of education. Wide-reaching ripples emerge that begin with my relationship with myself. Do I view myself as worthy and interconnected? If I do, this perspective allows me to honor and accept others. This impacts my relationship first with my peers and colleagues. If I know how to honor and accept the adults in my life, then I will more likely honor and accept my students and invite them to honor and accept their peers as well. I have to live this restorative justice philosophy if I expect my students to engage with it. If I think this is just good for my students, I run the risk of using restorative justice principles and practices to manipulate them. The ripples extend to my engagement with curriculum and pedagogy. Does the curriculum honor the people being studied, or does it measure, devalue, or forget them? In my pedagogy, have I made space for all students to have a voice and presence in the activities I have planned for them? The ripples also include my relationship with the institution, its policies, and the broader community. I consider how I am connected to how the school operates. I think about my relationship with parents, the custodial staff, the bus drivers, educational assistants. Do they know and feel I honor them? One particular approach that is a vehicle for developing relational communities is the talking circle. Adopted from Indigenous cultures, simply being present together in circle gives everyone space and opportunity to share, so interconnectedness is nurtured. A topic or open-ended question is posed. The quiet ones are given space without needing to assert themselves. The more dominant learn how to listen more fully. This is made possible using a talking piece passed from person to person around the circle. All contributions are heard and valued. When we have a school culture where relationships come first, this circle dialogue then naturally is used to address conflict as well. Restorative justice through relationships first is all about working together for each other's well-being.
Restorative justice through relationships first has really impacted my relationship with self. For example, in the latter part of my teaching, I found myself in conflict with another colleague, and a restorative approach was suggested to us, and I found myself being very resistant to it. And it made me reflect as to why was I resisting this, and how uncomfortable I felt in that process. And, did I play a role in this conflict? And did I have to own my part in that? It made me look again inward and look at the things I value and look at the things that I believe in. And by turning that lens inward, I was once again able to recognize through my relationship with self where I needed to go to make that problem better.
My relationships with my colleagues in the context of restorative justice has really improved my connection with my co-workers. We've spent a lot of time engaging in reflection about how we connect. I work a lot one-on-one with various teachers, and I use oftentimes the framework questions when I'm trying to help them problem solve. So that's helped me develop a greater understanding of their issues and conflicts in the classroom. And as well as a school administrator, we do checkout circles every staff meeting and PD days. And I find that's a really lovely way to connect, because sometimes people are struggling with things and they can be very, very open in that kind of circle. Other times they're more casual, and that's all fine too, but it's just a chance for everyone's voice, the quiet ones and the more outgoing ones, to be heard in a really equalizing environment.
The impact of restorative justice through relationships first on student-teacher relationships at our school has been very important. It's been seen as developing a culture of trust and respect amongst teachers and students with discipline and learning challenges. All members feel they're valued members of their class environment, and teachers have shown, and even students, decrease in stress because they know their voice is being heard, whether it's a discipline issue or an academic challenge. And students are remaining calm in this discussion with their teachers due to the fact that the teachers are feeling calm as well, which makes a much better learning environment for all involved.
My experience with restorative justice through relationships first, the way that that's impacted my relationship with students is that I stopped to listen more deeply to everybody. In a busy day, it's easy to hear the child that's being the loudest or is the most boisterous or the most extroverted. But I find that even though I probably would have said everybody's equal, I've really become more in tune with equity and each child having a strong voice.
The impact of restorative justice through relationships first on student relationships at our school is that they are beginning now to develop dialogue skills in a positive way. The children are being taught the chat, which is a caring harm awareness talk, where they have safe dialogue and their voices will be heard, whether it's with themselves or with other teachers. And they get to discuss what has happened. They get to talk about how they feel. And they also get to resolve the issue between them and the other person and come to a conclusion or consensus on what they need to do to move on. As well, it affects the school atmosphere, and it seems that the teachers as well as the students are calmer, and it takes care of all the challenges that they seem to come across in their daily activities.
before I got to know restorative justice on a deeper level, and I still have lots to learn about restorative justice. I would say that children in my classroom had a really strong sense of communication, and we'd always give ourselves a team name and stuff. But when I really started to discover restorative justice and the whole relationships first idea, I could see students communicating on a deeper level themselves, because they were seeing that that's the way that we were all being with each other. They were modeling that back to each other, and instead of coming to tattle on each other, they would be trying to work out things, and they were better able to communicate to each other about their feelings, and they were better able to hear each other, which is amazing when you think they're already a really nice class, and they're already really nice children, and you see them handle situations much better, and they're very concerned about hurting each other and repairing harm that has been done. And adults in the building last year, when I started to implement circles, started to notice how the children in this class were talking to each other and treating each other, and then also how they were talking to other adults in the building based on that. It's just amazing. I highly recommend that if you can pursue knowledge in the area of relationships and restorative justice, that you do. It's a very rewarding way to handle yourself.
The impact of restorative justice through relationships first on pedagogy and curriculum is that traditionally curriculum separates teachers from students, like masters and novices. But through relationships first approach to restorative justice, you really find an individualization of curriculum needs that really moves away from evaluation as the final goal or instance of how education is valued. In that model, we together in relationship, teacher-student, make choices about, decide on tactics within, and enter into critical, self-reflexive relationships in thinking about education together. So it really is a different way of being with someone else in education. We spent a class and a half watching this documentary about ancient Rome, about Julius Caesar. And the questions that we tried to gather and pull out of the documentary were, what values did Caesar embody in his life? An example of that would be using a unit on Julius Caesar to talk about the values of the Roman era empire and trying to relate those values reflectively to the values that we have today, that we hold today, not only in our stated values, but the lived values we have. And we use that to talk about our values in education, what it means to be in competition with each other as a kind of foundational way that we are in education, through our marks, through applications for scholarships, through how we're ranked. And students use the curriculum there to become more aware of their relationship to those values in their own education.
Restorative justice through relationships first influences my relationship with the institution in that it provides for me a lens through which to examine the intent and the impact of policy and practice. So often institutions and policies take on a life of their own, and people end up serving the institution when in actuality it's the institution that needs to serve the people and provide for the well-being of people. Restorative justice in education actually empowers people to realize that we are in relationship with the institution. And when I understand that I'm in relationship with the institution, I work to ensure that the institution actually serves the people. So often I think about it as this, as people actually created bureaucracies, so people also are needed to change bureaucracies.
What is important to remember about restorative justice is that you're one piece of the puzzle, and the relationships, and the more that you get to know, even when you think you're a restorative, fair kind of person, the more that you explore and the more that you try things with the people that you're dealing with, whether they be your students or your colleagues or your friends, you'll be so surprised at how far that will go and how enriched that will be, those relationships.
Discomfort is part of the experience. If a person is really open to growth and entering into those relationships with students and with oneself, discomfort is something that we will experience.
The important thing to remember about restorative justice through relationships first is that each child, coming with different perspectives and from different backgrounds, that their voice will be heard.
We own that paradigm of restorative justice and we can live that paradigm. But sometimes we fall off and we revert to ways that we know. But that's okay, because we can get back on our feet and go back to the paradigm of restorative justice that is much more effective and relational in its approach.
I think the important thing to remember in terms of our relationship with self is that we need to look inward to see what our core values are, what are the things we believe in, how do we view the world, those types of inward reflection type questions that will allow us then to enter into relationships with other people.